A body in the library. A note in the wrong pocket. Coincidence or calculated misdirection? Welcome to Poirot Puzzles. I am your host, Creighton. Tell me, where in the world are you solving this mystery from today? Your messages always bring this community to life. Let's begin. The grand drawing room of Ashbourne Manor glittered under the light of a dozen crystal chandeliers, their prisms casting delicate rainbows across the polished parquet floor. The air was heavy with the scent of beeswax, old money, and whispered secrets. It was the night of Lady Eleanor Ashbourne's annual winter gala, a tradition that drew the crème de la crème of London society to her sprawling estate in the heart of Berkshire. The assembled guests, dukes and debutantes, industrialists and idle aristocrats, mingled with the practiced ease of those who knew their place in the world. Champagne flutes clinked, laughter rippled, and a string quartet played a lilting waltz in the background. It was, by all accounts, a perfect evening, until it wasn't. At precisely 11 minutes past 10, a gasp shattered the genteel hum of conversation. It came from Miss Clara Pembroke, a young heiress known for her delicate nerves and impeccable taste in pearls. She stood near the grand fireplace, her gloved hand trembling as she pointed to the lifeless form slumped in a high-backed velvet chair. The figure was unmistakably that of Sir Reginald Harrow, a man of 50, renowned for his ruthless business dealings and rumoured to have enemies in every corner of Whitehall. His face was ashen, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling, and a thin trickle of blood stained the crisp white of his evening shirt. A silver letter opener, ornate and gleaming wickedly, protruded from his chest. The room erupted into chaos. Women shrieked, men shouted for a doctor, and the string quartet faltered into silence. Lady Eleanor, a woman of stern composure even at 60, moved swiftly to the center of the room, her emerald gown trailing behind her like a battlefield banner. "Silence!" she commanded, her voice cutting through the pandemonium. "No one is to leave this room. We must summon the authorities at once." But the horror of Sir Reginald's murder was only the beginning. As the butler, a wiry man named Jenkins, darted toward the telephone in the hall, Miss Pembroke, still pale as a ghost, stammered out a second shocking revelation. I saw something," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the murmurs of the crowd. She pointed a trembling finger toward Sir Reginald's body. There, in his pocket, a piece of paper. It wasn't there before, I swear it. All eyes turned to the body. Indeed, protruding from the breast pocket of Sir Reginald's dinner jacket was the corner of a folded note, stark white against the black fabric. Lord Ashbourne, Lady Eleanor's stoic husband, stepped forward with a grimace and carefully extracted the paper, unfolding it with unsteady hands. The room held its breath as he read aloud, his voice thick with disbelief. "You thought you could ruin me. Now you pay. A friend." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. The note was a confession or a taunt. But whose hand had written it? And how had it found its way into Sir Reginald's pocket after his death? For Miss Pembroke swore, with tears in her eyes, that she had seen Sir Reginald adjust his jacket only minutes before the discovery of his body, and no such note had been there then. The gala had transformed into a grim tableau of suspicion. Every guest in the room, 32 in total by Lady Eleanor's meticulous count, glanced at their neighbours with narrowed eyes. Sir Reginald had been a man of wealth, power, and enemies. Who among them had hated him enough to plunge a letter opener into his heart? And who had dared to leave such a damning piece of evidence in plain sight as if mocking the very notion of justice? Lady Eleanor, her lips pressed into a thin line, turned to her husband. "We need more than the local constable for this, Charles. This is a matter for someone with finesse, someone who can see beyond the obvious." Lord Ashbourne nodded gravely. "I know just the man. If anyone can unravel this devilish puzzle, it is Hercule Poirot." And so, as the snow began to fall outside Ashbourne Manor, blanketing the world in an eerie hush, a message was dispatched to London. The stage was set, the players assembled, and a murder most foul awaited the keen eye of the Belgian detective. Somewhere among the silk gowns and tailored suits, a killer lurked, and a note, found in the wrong pocket, held the key to a mystery that would test even Poirot's legendary little grey cells. The drawing-room of Ashbourne Manor, once a stage for laughter and lively conversation, had transformed into a gilded cage. The 32 guests, now suspects in the brutal murder of Sir Reginald Harrow, stood or sat in uneasy clusters, their earlier joviality replaced by wary glances and whispered speculations. The body of Sir Reginald remained in the high-backed chair near the fireplace, covered now by a heavy brocade throw at Lady Eleanor's insistence, to preserve some semblance of decorum, she had declared. The snow continued to fall outside, blanketing the estate in silence, as if nature itself conspired to trap them all within these walls until the truth was unearthed. Lady Eleanor, ever the unflappable hostess even in the face of tragedy, had ordered the butler, Jenkins, to seal off the exits and ensure no one left the manor. "We must wait for the authorities, and for Monsieur Poirot," she announced, her voice carrying the weight of command. "Until then, no one is above suspicion, not even myself." Her stern gaze swept the room, daring anyone to challenge her decree. Lord Ashbourne, a man of few words but considerable presence, stood by the hearth, his brow furrowed as he clutched the mysterious note in his hand. The words, "You thought you could ruin me, now you pay. A friend," seemed to burn into the minds of everyone present. Who was this friend? And what ruin had Sir Reginald wrought to provoke such deadly vengeance? As the minutes ticked by, the suspects began to reveal themselves not through words, but through their silences, their nervous tics, and the way they avoided certain gazes. Lady Eleanor, sensing the need to maintain order, requested that everyone remain in the drawing-room or the adjacent library until help arrived. It was in this tense atmosphere that the key players of the drama began to emerge, each a potential piece in the deadly puzzle. First among them was Miss Clara Pembroke, the young heiress who had discovered both the body and the note. She sat on a chaise longue near the window, her delicate hands twisting a lace handkerchief as though it might unravel her own nerves. Her wide blue eyes darted from face to face, and her earlier assertion that the note had not been in Sir Reginald's pocket minutes before his death hung in the air like an accusation. Had she truly seen what she claimed, or was her hysteria a mask for something deeper? Rumor had it that her family's fortune had taken a disastrous turn after a failed investment with Sir Reginald, a motive, perhaps. Beside her, offering a comforting arm, was Captain Lionel Drake, a dashing war hero turned investor, whose sharp features and steely composure stood in stark contrast to Clara's fragility. He had been seen arguing with Sir Reginald earlier in the evening, their voices raised over matters of business ethics, as one guest had euphemistically put it. Captain Drake's military precision and quiet intensity made him a man who could kill with calculation, if he deemed it necessary. Across the room, near a gilt-framed portrait of some long-dead Ashbourne ancestor, stood Mrs. Beatrice Harrow, Sir Reginald's estranged wife. Her face was a mask of cold dignity, her black satin gown an almost funereal choice for the gala. She had not shed a single tear for her husband, though her gloved fingers gripped the stem of a champagne flute with such force that it seemed it might snap. Their marriage, it was whispered, had been a battlefield of mutual loathing, and Sir Reginald's rumoured infidelity had only deepened the wounds. Did her icy demeanour hide grief or triumph? Lurking near the library doors was Mr. Ernest Fielding, a sharp-eyed solicitor who had served as Sir Reginald's legal adviser for over a decade. His gaunt frame and nervous habit of adjusting his spectacles betrayed a man ill at ease, though whether from guilt or mere discomfort was unclear. Some said Fielding had been privy to Sir Reginald's more unsavoury dealings that could ruin reputations if exposed. Had he stabbed his client to protect his own secrets? Finally, there was young Thomas Ashbourne, Lady Eleanor's nephew and heir to the manor. A handsome but reckless youth of 22, he lounged against a marble column with a glass of brandy in hand, his smirk suggesting either indifference or bravado. He had lost a small fortune at the card tables to Sir Reginald only weeks prior, a debt that had reportedly strained family ties. His careless air could be a facade, or the mark of a man who believed himself untouchable. These five, among the larger crowd, stood out as lightning rods for suspicion, though every guest in the room harbored their own secrets. The air was thick with unspoken questions. Who had slipped the note into Sir Reginald's pocket? Whose hand had wielded the letter opener? And why had the murder been staged so publicly, as if to taunt them all? As the clock struck midnight, a distant crunch of tires on snow announced the arrival of a motor car. The room collectively held its breath. Was it the local police, bumbling and ill-equipped for such a complex crime? Or had Lord Ashbourne's urgent summons brought the one man capable of piercing the veil of deception that hung over Ashbourne Manor? Lady Eleanor moved toward the window, peering through the frost-laced glass. "He is here," she said simply, a note of relief in her voice. "Monsieur Poirot has arrived." The heavy oak doors of Ashbourne Manor swung open with a groan, admitting a gust of icy wind and a figure whose presence seemed to command the very air around him. Hercule Poirot stepped into the grand entrance hall, his small, impeccably dressed frame a stark contrast to the towering opulence of the manor. His black overcoat, dusted with flakes of snow, was removed with precise movements by the butler, Jenkins, revealing a perfectly tailored evening suit beneath. His waxed mustache, as symmetrical as a draftsman's line, twitched slightly as he surveyed the scene before him. His patent leather shoes gleamed under the chandelier's light, and his green eyes, sharp as cut emerald, took in every detail with an almost predatory focus. "Bonsoir, mes amis," Poirot greeted, his voice carrying a lilting Belgian accent that somehow softened the gravity of the moment. He bowed slightly to Lady Eleanor, who had hastened to meet him, her emerald gown rustling with urgency. "I am Hercule Poirot, at your service. Lord Ashbourne's message was most urgent, and I understand there has been a tragedy." Lady Eleanor, her stern demeanour softening for a moment under Poirot's courteous gaze, inclined her head. "Indeed, Monsieur Poirot, a murder, most foul. Sir Reginald Harrow has been killed, stabbed in my drawing-room, no less. We are all in shock, and I fear we are at the mercy of a cunning fiend. Will you help us?" Poirot's eyes flickered with a spark of interest, though his expression remained composed. "Mais oui, madame. A crime such as this, it is an affront to order, to symmetry. And Hercule Poirot, he does not tolerate such chaos. I shall restore the balance. You have my word." He tapped his gloved finger against his temple, a subtle gesture to his little grey cells, already at work. As Jenkins led Poirot toward the drawing-room, the Belgian detective's gaze darted about, noting the pristine condition of the marble floors, the polished banisters, and the faint tremor in the butler's hands as he carried Poirot's coat. "A house of elegance," Poirot murmured to himself, and yet, beneath the surface, a discord most profound. "Eh bien, we shall see." The drawing-room, still thick with tension, fell silent as Poirot entered. 32 pairs of eyes turned to him, some with curiosity, others with apprehension, and a few with barely concealed hostility. Poirot, undeterred, removed his gloves with deliberate care, placing them neatly on a side table before turning to address the assembly. His small stature belied the authority he exuded, as though his very presence demanded attention. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and measured, I am informed that a man, Sir Reginald Harrow, has met his end tonight under most distressing circumstances. A murder, it is a violation of the natural order, and I, Hercule Poirot, have been summoned to uncover the truth. I ask for your patience and your cooperation, for it is only through order and method that we shall find the one responsible." He paused, his piercing gaze sweeping the room, lingering for a fraction longer on certain faces. Miss Clara Pembroke's tear-streaked visage, Captain Lionel Drake's rigid posture, Mrs. Beatrice Harrow's cold stare. It was as though he could see beyond their carefully curated facades into the secrets they clutched like hidden daggers. Yet he said nothing of his observations, his expression inscrutable. Lord Ashbourne stepped forward, the folded note still in his hand, and offered it to Poirot with a grave nod. "This was found in Sir Reginald's pocket after his death, Monsieur Poirot. Miss Pembroke claims it was not there mere minutes before. It reads as a confession, or perhaps a taunt." Poirot took the note with gloved fingers, unfolding it with the precision of a surgeon. His eyes scanned the jagged handwriting, and a faint smile played at the corners of his mouth, not of amusement, but of intrigue. "Ah, you thought you could ruin me. Now you pay. A friend. Très intéressant. A note placed after the deed, you say? This is no mere accident of timing. It is a message, deliberate and bold. But to whom is it addressed? Sir Reginald, or perhaps all of us?" He folded the note once more, slipping it into his own pocket with a gesture that suggested it was now under his personal custody. Turning to the covered form of Sir Reginald in the high-backed chair, Poirot approached with a measured tread. He lifted the brocade throw just enough to observe the body, his face betraying no emotion as he noted the position of the letter opener protruding from the chest, the angle of the wound, and the faint stain of blood on the white shirt beneath. "A strike of precision," he murmured, almost to himself. "Not a crime of passion, no, but of intent. And yet the weapon, a letter opener from this very room, n'est-ce pas? A choice most curious." He replaced the throw with care, straightening it as though the act of tidying was itself a sacred ritual. Then, turning back to the room, he clapped his hands together once, sharply. "We must proceed with order. I shall require a private space to conduct my inquiries, and I must ask that no one disturb the scene of the crime further. Lady Eleanor, if you please, a room where I may speak with each of you in turn." Lady Eleanor nodded briskly, gesturing toward the library adjacent to the drawing-room. "Of course, Monsieur Poirot. It is at your disposal. Jenkins will ensure your privacy." "Merci, madame. And one more thing," Poirot added, his tone deceptively mild. "I must insist that no one leaves Ashbourne Manor until my investigation is complete. The snow, it traps us all, but it also ensures that the guilty remain within my reach. Let us hope that justice, like the snow, falls swiftly and without mercy." A murmur of unease rippled through the crowd, but Poirot paid it no heed. He adjusted his tie with a fastidious flick of his fingers, then strode toward the library doors, pausing only to cast one final glance over his shoulder. His eyes seemed to pierce each suspect in turn, as though he were already assembling the puzzle in his mind, piece by silent piece. "The human heart," he said softly, almost to himself. "It hides much, but it cannot hide from Hercule Poirot. We shall uncover the truth, mes amis. Of this I am certain." As the library doors closed behind him, the drawing-room erupted into hushed whispers once more. Who would Poirot summon first, and what secrets would his meticulous mind unearth in the interviews to come? So, outside, the snow fell heavier still, a silent shroud over Ashbourne Manor, while within, the air grew thicker with suspicion and dread. The library of Ashbourne Manor was a sanctuary of silence amidst the storm of suspicion that raged beyond its heavy oak doors. Shelves of leather-bound tomes stretched to the ceiling, their gilt spines glinting in the dim light of a single Tiffany lamp. A fire crackled in the grate, casting flickering shadows across the room, while Hercule Poirot sat behind a mahogany desk, his posture as precise as a metronome. Before him, a small notebook lay open, his fountain pen poised like a scalpel ready to dissect the human soul. He had requested that each suspect be brought to him one by one, and as the interviews began, the Belgian detective's little grey cells hummed with anticipation. The first to be summoned was Miss Clara Pembroke, the young heiress whose trembling voice had first drawn attention to Sir Reginald's body and the mysterious note. She entered the library with hesitant steps, her pale blue gown shimmering like moonlight, her lace handkerchief still clutched in her hands. Poirot rose briefly, offering a courteous nod as he gestured to the chair opposite him. "Mademoiselle Pembroke, please be seated. I assure you I seek only the truth, and your candor shall be of great assistance." Clara sank into the chair, her wide blue eyes meeting Poirot's with a mixture of fear and defiance. I'll tell you anything I know, Monsieur Poirot. I swear I saw nothing until I noticed Sir Reginald wasn't moving. And then, that note, it wasn't there before. I'm certain of it. Poirot's mustache twitched slightly as he scribbled a note in his book, his gaze never leaving her face. "Ah, mademoiselle, certainty is a rare and precious thing. Tell me, how can you be so sure of this timing? You adjusted your own shawl, perhaps, or glanced at the clock, oui? Describe for me the moment before you saw the body." Clara fidgeted, her fingers twisting the handkerchief. I was standing near the fireplace, speaking with Captain Drake about the quartet's performance. I remember Sir Reginald adjusting his jacket. He was across the room, talking to my uncle about some business matter. There was no paper in his pocket then. I'm sure I would have noticed. Then, not 5 minutes later, I saw him slumped in the chair, and the note was there. Poirot leaned back, his eyes narrowing ever so slightly. 5 minutes, you say? A small window for a bold act. And yet, mademoiselle, your eyes, they dart as though you fear I see more than you wish. Is there perhaps something else you noticed, a face, a movement, that you hesitate to share?" Clara's cheeks flushed, and she shook her head quickly. "No, nothing. I was in shock, that's all. Sir Reginald, he wasn't kind to my family. He cheated us in a deal last year, and we lost so much, but I couldn't do this." Poirot made another note, his expression unreadable. "Merci, mademoiselle. For now, you may go, but remember, the truth, it hides not for long from Hercule Poirot." As Clara left, her steps unsteady, Poirot tapped his pen against the desk, his mind already sifting through her words for contradictions. Next came Captain Lionel Drake, whose military bearing filled the room with an air of disciplined tension. He sat without being asked, his jaw set, his eyes meeting Poirot's with a challenge. "I've faced worse interrogations on the battlefield, Monsieur Poirot. Ask your questions, but I warn you, I've nothing to hide." Poirot smiled faintly, a gesture that did not reach his eyes. "Ah, Captain, the battlefield of the mind is often more treacherous than any war. Tell me, you argued with Sir Reginald this evening, did you not? Over business ethics, I am told. What precisely did this concern?" Drake's hands clenched briefly on the arms of the chair before he forced them to relax. "Sir Reginald was a crook in a gentleman's suit. He misled investors, myself included, into a venture that collapsed under shady dealings. I confronted him tonight, yes, demanding accountability, but I didn't kill him. I'm a man of honor, not a murderer." Poirot tilted his head, studying the captain's rigid posture. "Honor, it is a fine shield, Captain, but even the finest shield can hide a wound. Where were you in the moment Sir Reginald adjusted his jacket, as Mademoiselle Pembroke described?" "I was with her, near the fireplace," Drake replied without hesitation. "I saw Harrow across the room, alive and pompous as ever. I didn't notice his pocket, though. My attention was on Clara. She seemed distressed even before the discovery." Poirot scribbled another note, his expression betraying nothing. "Distressed, you say? Most curious. Merci, Captain. You may go, but I suspect we shall speak again. As Drake exited, Poirot's gaze lingered on the door, his mind turning over the captain's unflinching demeanor. Was it the confidence of innocence, or the mask of a killer trained to conceal? Mrs. Beatrice Harrow was the third to face Poirot's scrutiny, her black satin gown a somber contrast to the warm tones of the library. She sat with the regal air of a queen on trial, her face an impassive mask. "I suppose you'll ask if I despised my husband, Monsieur Poirot," she said before he could speak, her voice cool as frost. "The answer is yes. Everyone knew our marriage was a sham, but I did not kill him." Poirot's mustache twitched with interest. "Madame, I do not presume guilt, only motive. Tell me, where were you when Sir Reginald met his end? And what of this note? Did you see anyone near him who might have placed it?" Beatrice's lips thinned. "I was near the quartet, avoiding Reginald, as I always did. I saw him speaking with Lord Ashbourne, then sitting in that chair. I didn't notice the note until Miss Pembroke pointed it out. As for who might have placed it, anyone in that room had reason to hate him. Choose your pick." Poirot made a soft, thoughtful sound, his pen scratching against the paper. "Ah, madame, hatred is a heavy burden, but so is indifference. You're calm, it intrigues me. We shall speak more, I think." As Beatrice rose to leave, her movements graceful yet controlled, Poirot watched her with a gaze that seemed to peel back layers of ice. The interviews continued into the early hours, with Ernest Fielding, the nervous solicitor, and Thomas Ashbourne, the reckless nephew, each offering their own accounts. Fielding stammering about legal disputes, Thomas laughing off gambling debts with a smirk. Each suspect's words added threads to the tapestry Poirot was weaving in his mind, though he revealed nothing of his thoughts. As the last interviewee departed, Poirot closed his notebook, his eyes gleaming with quiet satisfaction. Contradictions had emerged, small, subtle, but present. Timings did not align, glances betrayed unspoken fears, and the note, that enigmatic taunt, pulsed at the heart of the mystery. He stood, adjusting his tie with meticulous care, and murmured to himself, "The stage is set, the players speak their lines. But who, I wonder, has rehearsed a lie?" Stepping to the library door, Poirot prepared to rejoin the assembled suspects. The next phase of his investigation awaited, and with it, the first false lead that would test even his impeccable logic. The first pale light of dawn crept through the frosted windows of Ashbourne Manor, casting a ghostly glow over the drawing room where the suspects remained, their faces drawn with exhaustion and suspicion. The snow had ceased falling sometime in the night, but its heavy blanket still isolated the estate from the outside world, trapping all within under the weight of an unsolved murder. Hercule Poirot emerged from the library, his notebook tucked neatly under one arm, his expression as composed as ever. Hours of interviews had yielded a mosaic of half-truths and hidden fears, but the Belgian detective's keen mind was already sifting through the inconsistencies, seeking the fracture lines in each suspect's story. As Poirot re-entered the drawing room, the murmur of whispered conversations fell silent. Lady Eleanor, standing near the fireplace with a cup of tea that had long gone cold, turned to him with a mixture of hope and apprehension. "Monsieur Poirot, have you made any progress? The local constable arrived an hour ago, but I fear he is out of his depth. He awaits your guidance." Poirot inclined his head, his mustache twitching with a faint trace of disdain at the mention of the constable. "Madame, progress is a matter of method, not haste. I have spoken with many, and I see much, but truth, it is a shy creature. It hides until the moment is right. Let us see what this constable has to say." The constable, a ruddy-faced man named Hargreaves, stood near the covered form of Sir Reginald Harrow, his helmet tucked under one arm. He straightened as Poirot approached, clearing his throat with a nervous cough. "Monsieur Poirot, sir, I've had a look about, and I've spoken to a few of the staff. I reckon we've got a strong lead already. It's young Thomas Ashbourne, Lady Eleanor's nephew. I've got reason to believe he's our man." Poirot's eyebrows rose slightly, though his face remained impassive. "Ah, Constable Hargreaves, a conclusion so swift? This is most intriguing. Pray, enlighten me. What evidence do you bring against Monsieur Thomas?" Hargreaves puffed out his chest, eager to impress. "Well, sir, it's common knowledge round these parts that Thomas owed Sir Reginald a fortune in gambling debts. Near £20,000, I'm told. Word is, Sir Reginald pressed him hard for payment at the gala. Right there in front of half the room." There was a row, voices raised, and Thomas stormed off not half an hour before the body was found. Plus, one of the footmen saw him near the fireplace, fidgeting with something in his pocket just before Miss Pembroke screamed. Sounds like motive and opportunity to me. The room stirred with uneasy whispers. Thomas Ashbourne, lounging against a nearby column with a glass of brandy still in hand, straightened abruptly, his smirk vanishing. "That's rubbish," he snapped, his voice edged with indignation. "Yes, I owed Harrow money, and yes, we argued. But I didn't kill him. I was fetching myself another drink when it happened. I wasn't even near him." Poirot turned to Thomas, his green eyes piercing. "Monsieur Ashbourne, a temper, it is a dangerous companion, but let us not leap to judgment. Constable, this footman, bring him to me. I wish to hear his account with precision." The footman, a lanky young man named Peter, was summoned from the servants' quarters, his apron still dusted with flour from early morning duties. He shuffled nervously before Poirot, his eyes darting to Thomas and back. I did see Mr. Thomas near the fireplace, sir," he stammered. "He was muttering to himself, angry-like, and he kept touching his jacket pocket. I thought maybe he had a flask or summat, but now, well, I don't know." Poirot's gaze lingered on Peter for a moment before shifting to Thomas. "And you, Monsieur Ashbourne, what was in this pocket of yours? A flask, as the boy suggests, or perhaps something more sinister?" Thomas's face reddened, but he reached into his jacket and produced a small silver cigarette case, slamming it onto a nearby table. "There, that's what I was fiddling with. I was worked up after the argument, needed a smoke to calm down. Ask anyone. I stepped out to the terrace for a few minutes. I wasn't planting notes or stabbing anyone." The constable crossed his arms, unconvinced. "Convenient story, lad. But that debt, that row, it all points to you. I'm inclined to take you in for questioning, formal-like, unless Monsieur Poirot objects." Poirot raised a hand, his gesture as precise as a conductor halting an orchestra. "Non, Constable, I object. The evidence, it is circumstantial, and Hercule Poirot does not build a case on whispers and convenience. A debt, an argument. These are motives, but they are not proof. And the note, the note. It speaks of ruin, not of mere money. We must dig deeper. Where were the others in this critical moment? Where was the letter opener before it became a weapon? These are the questions that lead to truth, not the hasty arrest of a young man with a temper." Hargreaves frowned, clearly displeased, but he nodded reluctantly. "As you say, sir. But I'll keep an eye on him, mark my words." Poirot turned away from the constable, his attention sweeping the room once more. Thomas, exhaling with visible relief, shot Poirot a grudging look of gratitude before resuming his careless posture against the column. But Poirot's mind was elsewhere, turning over the footman's testimony, the timing of Thomas's alleged movements, and the broader tableau of the evening. The accusation against Thomas was too neat, too obvious, a distraction, perhaps, from a subtler game at play. Poirot's disdain for physical evidence over psychological insight guided him. It was not the cigarette case or the footman's sighting that mattered, but the behavior, the contradictions, the hidden fears he had glimpsed in every interview. Lady Eleanor approached Poirot, her expression troubled. Monsieur Poirot, do you truly believe Thomas is innocent, or do you suspect something or someone else? Poirot's smile was enigmatic, his voice soft but firm. Madame, I suspect everyone until I suspect no one. The human heart, it is a labyrinth, and I shall navigate its twists with care. For now I must observe further. The guilty, they will betray themselves, not with a weapon, but with a word, a glance, a hesitation. As the drawing-room settled into an uneasy quiet, once more, Poirot moved to a corner, his notebook open again, his pen poised. He had dismissed the first false lead, but in doing so, he had stirred the pot of suspicion. Eyes darted toward Thomas, then away, as whispers of doubt spread like wildfire. Who else might the constable or Poirot turn their gaze to next? And what unseen tensions would surface under the detective's relentless scrutiny? Outside, the dawn light grew stronger, illuminating the snow-covered grounds of Ashbourne Manor. Inside, Poirot's mind churned, preparing for the next phase of his investigation, a psychological game that would test the nerves of the guilty and the innocent alike. The morning sun cast long, cold shadows across the drawing-room of Ashbourne Manor, its pale light doing little to warm the atmosphere of suspicion that clung to every corner. The suspects, weary from a sleepless night, shifted uncomfortably under the watchful eyes of Constable Hargreaves and the ever-observant Hercule Poirot. The dismissal of the initial accusation against Thomas Ashbourne had only deepened the unease. If not the indebted nephew, then who had plunged the letter-opener into Sir Reginald Harrow's heart? And who had placed that taunting note? You thought you could ruin me. Now you pay. A friend in the dead man's pocket. Poirot stood near the grand fireplace, his small, precise frame a stark contrast to the towering opulence around him. His patent leather shoes gleamed, his moustache was as impeccably groomed as ever, and his green eyes flickered with a quiet intensity that unnerved even the most composed in the room. He had rebuffed the constable's hasty conclusion, but in doing so, he had set the stage for a more subtle approach, a game of the mind designed to coax the guilty into revealing themselves through their own behavior. Poirot knew that physical evidence was secondary to the contradictions of the human psyche, and he intended to exploit this to its fullest. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice cutting through the tense murmurs with the clarity of a bell. We find ourselves at an impasse. A man is dead. A note speaks of vengeance, and yet the hand that struck remains hidden. But fear not. Hercule Poirot does not despair. The truth, it is like a shadow. It cannot hide forever when the light of reason shines upon it. I propose we revisit the moment of the crime. Let us reconstruct the scene, and in doing so, perhaps a memory or a lie will betray the one who wishes to remain unseen. A ripple of unease passed through the room. Lady Eleanor, standing near her husband with a furrowed brow, spoke up. Monsieur Poirot, surely you do not mean to reenact such a dreadful moment? We are all shaken enough as it is. Poirot turned to her, his expression polite but firm. Madame, shock is a temporary state, but justice, it is eternal. I do not ask for a performance, merely a recollection. Each of you will place yourselves where you stood in the moments before Mademoiselle Pembroke's discovery of the body. I wish to see with my own eyes the positions, the proximities, the possibilities, and I shall observe. Not the body, non, but the living. It is the living who tell me what I need to know. Reluctantly, under Poirot's insistent gaze, the suspects complied. Miss Clara Pembroke returned to her spot near the fireplace, her hands trembling as she recounted her conversation with Captain Drake, who stood beside her, his posture rigid as ever. Mrs. Beatrice Harrow positioned herself near the quartet's corner, her face as cold and impassive as it had been during her interview. Ernest Fielding, the solicitor, hovered near a bookshelf, adjusting his spectacles nervously, while Thomas Ashbourne, still bristling from the earlier accusation, leaned against his column with a forced smirk though his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. The other guests filled in the remaining spaces, their movements awkward under Poirot's scrutiny. Poirot paced slowly among them, his hands clasped behind his back, his head tilted as if listening to an unseen melody. He paused near Clara, noting the way her gaze darted to Captain Drake before dropping to the floor. "Mademoiselle, you spoke of Sir Reginald adjusting his jacket. Show me, s'il vous plaît, where he stood in your sight." Clara hesitated, then pointed to the high-backed chair, now empty save for the brocade throw that had covered the body. "There, Monsieur Poirot." He was facing Lord Ashbourne, speaking animatedly. "I saw no paper, no note, not then." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable, before turning to Captain Drake. "And you, Captain, you were here, beside Mademoiselle Pembroke. Your eyes, they were on her. Oui? Or perhaps elsewhere, on Sir Reginald, or on someone who moved too close to him." Drake's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. "I was focused on Clara. She seemed upset, as I told you. I barely glanced at Harrow until the scream." Poirot made a small, thoughtful sound, his gaze shifting to Mrs. Beatrice Harrow across the room. "Madame, from your vantage near the music, you had a clear view of much of the room. Did you see a movement, an approach to Sir Reginald, that struck you as odd? Or perhaps your attention was elsewhere?" Beatrice's eyes narrowed slightly, though her demeanor remained icy. "I saw nothing unusual, Monsieur Poirot. I avoided looking at my husband whenever possible. If someone approached him, I did not notice." Poirot's mustache twitched, and he moved on, stopping briefly before Ernest Fielding. "Monsieur Fielding, your nerves, they betray you. You adjust your spectacles as if to see clearer, yet I wonder if you saw too much. Where was your gaze when Sir Reginald sat in that chair?" Fielding stammered, his thin hands fluttering. I was looking at my notes, sir. I had a disagreement with Sir Reginald earlier about a contract, and I was reviewing my points. I didn't see anything, I swear." Poirot's silent observation lingered, his eyes piercing before he turned to Thomas Ashbourne. "And you, monsieur, you were angry after your dispute. You stepped to the terrace, you say, for a cigarette, but from here, near the column, you could see much before you left. Did your temper blind you, or did you see a shadow move too near Sir Reginald?" Thomas scoffed, though his smirk wavered. "I saw nothing worth noting. Just Harrow being his usual pompous self. I needed air, not a murder plot." Poirot completed his circuit of the room, returning to the center. He clapped his hands together once, sharply, the sound startling several suspects. "Merci, mes amis, for your cooperation. I see much now, the distances, the angles, the glances that speak louder than words. A note does not appear by magic, nor does a letter opener fly without a hand. Someone among you moved in those critical moments, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall know who." He paused, letting his words hang in the air like a challenge. His gaze swept the room once more, lingering on subtle reactions. A flinch from Clara, a tightened grip from Drake, a fleeting frown from Beatrice. He was not accusing yet, but probing, testing their nerves, watching for the crack in their facades. The guilty, he knew, would feel the weight of his scrutiny most acutely, and in their discomfort, they might betray a fatal flaw. As the suspects dispersed back to their seats, murmuring among themselves, Poirot retreated to a corner, his notebook open once more. He jotted a few cryptic marks, his mind buzzing with the patterns forming in his little grey cells. The psychological game had begun, and though no confession had surfaced, he sensed the tension coiling tighter. Something or someone would break soon, and with it, a new revelation would alter the course of the investigation. Outside, the sun climbed higher, melting the edges of the snow, but within Ashbourne Manor, the chill of suspicion remained. Poirot's game was far from over, and the next twist awaited just beyond the horizon of his calculated provocations. The late morning sun filtered through the heavy drapes of Ashbourne Manor, casting a muted glow over the drawing room where tension simmered like a pot on the verge of boiling over. Hercule Poirot's psychological game had left the suspects rattled, their nerves frayed by his probing questions and relentless scrutiny. The reenactment of positions had yielded no immediate confessions, but Poirot's green eyes had noted every flinch, every averted gaze, storing them as pieces of an intricate puzzle yet to be fully assembled. The air was thick with unspoken accusations, and the 32 guests, each a potential killer, watched one another with growing distrust. Poirot stood near a window, gazing out at the snow-covered grounds, as if the pristine white expanse might reflect the clarity he sought. His hands were clasped behind his back, his posture as precise as ever, but his mind churned with the nuances of human behavior he had observed. The note. You thought you could ruin me. Now you pay. A friend remained the enigma at the heart of Sir Reginald Harrow's murder, and Poirot knew that the key to its meaning lay not in physical evidence, but in the hidden motives of those trapped within these walls. His little grey cells hummed, sensing that the investigation was on the cusp of a shift, a revelation that would alter everything. Lady Eleanor, ever the composed hostess despite the strain etched into her features, approached Poirot with a cup of tea on a silver tray. "Monsieur Poirot, you've worked tirelessly through the night and morning. Please, take a moment to refresh yourself. We are all grateful for your efforts, though I fear this nightmare will not end soon." Poirot accepted the tea with a polite nod, his mustache twitching slightly. "Merci, madame. But rest. It is a luxury I cannot afford while disorder reigns. A crime such as this, it is a stain upon the symmetry of life, and I shall not cease until order is restored. Tell me, have all your guests remained within these rooms as I requested?" Lady Eleanor hesitated, her brow furrowing. "I believe so. Jenkins has been vigilant, and the snow has made escape impossible. Why do you ask?" Before Poirot could reply, a sharp cry pierced the stillness of the drawing room, drawing all eyes to Miss Clara Pembroke. She stood near the library doors, her hands pressed to her mouth, her wide blue eyes filled with alarm. "He's gone," she gasped, her voice trembling. "Mr. Fielding, Ernest Fielding, he's not here. I was just speaking to him, not 10 minutes ago, and now he's vanished." A murmur of confusion and fear rippled through the room. Poirot set his tea down with deliberate care, his expression sharpening as he strode toward Clara. "Mademoiselle, calm yourself and explain. You spoke with Monsieur Fielding. Where, precisely, and what did you discuss?" Clara's hands fluttered nervously as she struggled to compose herself. In the hallway, just outside the drawing room, he seemed agitated, more so than before. He muttered something about needing air, needing to think, and then he walked toward the east wing. I thought nothing of it until I returned and noticed he wasn't among us. I've checked the library, the conservatory. He's nowhere. Poirot's gaze swept the room, counting heads with the precision of a mathematician. Indeed, the gaunt figure of Ernest Fielding, Sir Reginald's solicitor, was absent. The other suspects stirred, their whispers growing into a clamor of speculation. Constable Hargreaves, who had been lingering near the fireplace, pushed forward with a scowl. "Sounds like a runner to me, Monsieur Poirot. Guilty conscience, I'd wager. I'll organize a search party at once. Can't have got far in this snow." Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm but commanding. "Non, Constable. Haste. It is the enemy of method. We do not yet know if Monsieur Fielding has fled or if something more sinister has occurred. A man does not vanish in a house of this size without reason. Lady Eleanor, I require a full accounting of the manor's exits and any hidden passages. Jenkins, summon the staff. Every maid, every footman. I must know if anyone saw Monsieur Fielding after Mademoiselle Pembroke's encounter." Lady Eleanor nodded briskly, dispatching Jenkins with a wave of her hand, while Poirot turned back to the assembled guests. "Mesdames et messieurs, remain where you are. If Monsieur Fielding has fled, He leaves behind a trail of intent. If he has been detained, then we have a second enigma on our hands. Either way, I, Hercule Poirot, shall uncover the truth of this disappearance." As the staff were rounded up and questioned, Poirot moved through the room, his eyes darting to every face for signs of guilt or knowledge. Captain Drake's stoic demeanor held firm, though his fingers twitched as if itching for action. Mrs. Beatrice Harrow's icy facade showed a flicker of curiosity, her gaze following Poirot with an intensity that suggested more than idle interest. Thomas Ashbourne, still smarting from his earlier accusation, muttered under his breath about cowardly solicitors, while Clara dabbed at her eyes with her handkerchief, visibly shaken. Jenkins returned after several minutes, his face pale. "Monsieur Poirot, sir, one of the kitchen maids saw Mr. Fielding heading toward the east wing, as Miss Pembroke said. She thought he looked unwell, sweating, muttering to himself. That was about 15 minutes ago. No one's seen him since, and the east wing doors to the outside are locked and undisturbed. The snow around them shows no footprints, sir." Poirot's mustache twitched with intrigue. "Ah, très intéressant. No escape through the snow, no breach of the doors. Then Monsieur Fielding remains within these walls, or so we must assume. But why the east wing? What lies there that draws a man in distress?" Lady Eleanor answered, her voice steady despite the growing tension. "The east wing houses guest quarters, a small study, and access to the old servants' stairs. It's rarely used during events like the gala. There's nothing of value there. No reason for him to go unless he sought privacy for something." Poirot tapped his temple, his mind racing. "Privacy, madame, or perhaps a meeting. A man agitated, as Mademoiselle Pembroke describes, does not wander without purpose. We must search the east wing at once, but with care. If Monsieur Fielding hides, we must not startle him. If he is indisposed, we must preserve whatever scene we find." As Poirot organized a small search party, himself, Constable Hargreaves, Jenkins, and Lord Ashbourne, the atmosphere in the drawing-room grew heavier. Whispered theories abounded. Had Fielding fled from guilt, unable to bear Poirot's scrutiny? Or had he, too, fallen victim to the unseen hand that struck Sir Reginald? The note's words echoed in Poirot's mind. "You thought you could ruin me. Now you pay." And he wondered if Fielding's disappearance was the next act in a grim play of vengeance. The search party moved toward the east wing, Poirot's precise steps leading the way. Behind them, the suspects waited, their nerves stretched to breaking. Whatever awaited in the shadowed corridors of Ashbourne Manor, Poirot knew it would change the course of his investigation, peeling back another layer of deception in a mystery that grew darker by the hour. The east wing of Ashbourne Manor was a stark contrast to the opulent grandeur of the drawing-room and central halls. Its corridors were dimly lit, the air heavy with the musty scent of disuse, and the polished elegance of the gala spaces gave way to faded tapestries and creaking floorboards. Hercule Poirot led the small search party, Constable Hargreaves, Jenkins the butler, and Lord Ashbourne, through the shadowed passageways, his patent leather shoes tapping a precise rhythm against the worn wood. The disappearance of Ernest Fielding, Sir Reginald Harrow's nervous solicitor, had cast a new pall over the investigation, raising questions as chilling as the winter wind outside. Had Fielding fled from guilt, or had another unseen act of malice befallen him? Poirot's green eyes darted to every detail as they moved deeper into the east wing. A cobweb undisturbed in a corner, a faint scuff on the floor, the way the dust lay unevenly on a forgotten side table. His mind, ever attuned to the smallest deviations from order, sought patterns in the mundane. "A man does not vanish into thin air, mes amis," he murmured, almost to himself. "If Monsieur Fielding is here, he leaves a trace, perhaps not of his body, but of his intent." Constable Hargreaves, trudging behind with a heavy lantern, grumbled under his breath. "If you ask me, sir, the man's bolted through some hidden exit. Guilty as sin, I reckon. He knew too much about Sir Reginald's dirty dealings. We're wasting time poking about in dusty corners. Poirot's moustache twitched with a flicker of disdain, though his tone remained polite. Ah, Constable, the body may flee, but the mind, it cannot escape the scrutiny of Hercule Poirot. We seek not just a man, but a reason. Why the East Wing? What draws a man in distress to a place so removed from the gaiety of the gala? Let us proceed with method, not assumption. They reached the guest quarters first, a series of small, sparsely furnished rooms with narrow beds and shuttered windows. Each door was opened, each space inspected, but no sign of Fielding emerged, no discarded coat, no overturned chair, nothing to suggest a struggle or a hurried departure. Lord Ashbourne, his brow furrowed with concern, muttered, "These rooms haven't been used in months. If Fielding came here, it wasn't to rest." Jenkins, ever diligent, checked the wardrobe in the last room, his hands trembling slightly as he pushed aside moth-eaten drapes. "Nothing, sir," he reported, his voice tight. "Not a soul's been here." Poirot nodded, unfazed, and gestured toward the small study at the end of the corridor. "Then we proceed. A study, it is a place of thought, of secrets. Perhaps Monsieur Fielding sought such a sanctuary." The study was a cramped room, dominated by a heavy oak desk littered with yellowed papers and an old inkwell long since dried up. A single window, frosted with ice, cast a pale sheen over the space, and a thin layer of dust coated every surface. Except, Poirot noted with a sudden sharpening of his gaze, a small area near the desk's edge. There, the dust was smudged, as if something had been moved or placed there recently. He stepped closer, his movements deliberate, and bent to examine the desk without disturbing it. "Eh bien," he murmured, his voice a whisper of intrigue. A disturbance, most subtle, yet most telling. Something was here, and now it is not. Or perhaps it is hidden in plain sight. His gloved fingers traced the air above the desk, careful not to touch as he scanned the surrounding area. His eyes fell on a small brass keyhole in the desk's top drawer, its surrounding wood slightly scratched, as if recently manipulated. Constable Hargreaves peered over Poirot's shoulder, frowning. "What have you got there, sir? Looks like nothing to me. Just an old desk nobody's touched in years." Poirot straightened, his expression inscrutable. "Ah, Constable. To the untrained eye, it is nothing, but to Hercule Poirot, it is a whisper of intent. This desk, it has been touched recently, within hours. And these scratches, they speak of a key turned in haste, perhaps by a hand unsteady with fear or urgency. I wonder, what does such a drawer conceal?" Lord Ashbourne stepped forward, producing a ring of keys from his pocket. "I believe I have the key to this desk, Monsieur Poirot. It's been locked for ages, used to belong to my late uncle for private correspondence. Shall I open it?" Poirot hesitated, his mind racing. To open the drawer now might reveal a clue prematurely, alerting the guilty before he had fully woven his net. Yet to ignore it risked losing a vital piece of the puzzle. After a moment, he shook his head. "Non, monsieur. For now, we leave it as it is. The discovery, it is mine to hold close, like a card played only at the right moment. Let us continue our search for Monsieur Fielding, but mark this place. Jenkins, ensure no one enters this study until I return." Jenkins nodded, though his eyes betrayed confusion, while Hargreaves muttered about fancy notions under his breath. Poirot ignored the skepticism, his focus unwavering. The smudged dust and scratched keyhole were a hidden clue, a silent testament to someone's actions in the East Wing, perhaps Fielding's, perhaps another's. But Poirot would not reveal his find yet. His method demanded patience, the slow assembly of facts into a tapestry of truth. The drawer's contents, whatever they might be, would wait until he had more to connect them to the broader web of deceit. They moved on to the old servants' stairs, a narrow, winding passage that led down to the kitchens and up to the attic. The air grew colder here, the silence oppressive, and still no trace of Fielding emerged. No footprints marred the dusty steps. No discarded items hinted at a struggle. As the search party retraced their steps back toward the main house, Poirot's mind churned with possibilities. Was Fielding hiding, driven by guilt or fear? Had he stumbled upon something or someone that silenced him, and how did the disturbed desk in the study fit into the night's deadly game? As they re-entered the drawing room, the suspects' anxious faces turned toward them, seeking answers. Clara Pembroke's voice trembled as she asked, "Did you find him, Monsieur Poirot? Is Mr. Fielding safe?" Poirot's gaze swept the room, lingering on each face for a fraction longer than necessary. "Non, mademoiselle. Monsieur Fielding remains elusive. But rest assured, I see more than I say. The truth, it draws nearer with each passing hour. For now, we wait and we watch." He said nothing of the hidden clue in the study, keeping his discovery close as he resumed his place near the fireplace, his notebook open once more. The suspects murmured among themselves, their unease palpable, while Poirot's little grey cells worked tirelessly. The disturbed desk was a piece of the puzzle, but not yet the key to unlock it. A final gathering loomed on the horizon where all threads would be drawn together, but first, more layers of deception awaited peeling back. Outside, the snow began to melt under the midday sun, but within Ashbourne Manor, the chill of mystery deepened. Poirot's hidden clue was a silent promise of revelation, one he would guard until the moment was ripe. The afternoon sun hung low over Ashbourne Manor, its wan light casting long shadows across the drawing room where the suspects had reconvened after hours of restless waiting. The melting snow outside had begun to reveal patches of the frozen ground, but within these walls, the chill of unease remained as frigid as ever. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small, meticulous frame a beacon of calm amidst the storm of suspicion that swirled around him. His patent leather shoes gleamed under the chandelier's light, his mustache was as precisely groomed as always, and his green eyes held a quiet intensity that seemed to pierce through every facade. The disappearance of Ernest Fielding, Sir Reginald Harrow's solicitor, had deepened the mystery, leaving the 32 guests, and now 31, with Fielding missing, on edge. Poirot's discovery of the disturbed desk in the East Wing study remained a closely guarded secret, a hidden clue he had chosen not to reveal until the moment was ripe. He had spent the intervening hours observing, listening, and piecing together the subtle threads of behavior and contradiction that wove through the accounts of the night's events. Now, as the clock neared 4 o'clock, he had summoned all present for a final gathering, a moment to lay bare the layers of deception, though not yet the ultimate truth. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and measured, carrying the weight of authority across the hushed room, "we have endured a trial most grave. A man, Sir Reginald Harrow, lies dead, struck down by a hand unknown. A note bearing words of vengeance. You thought you could ruin me. Now you pay. A friend was placed in his pocket after the deed, a taunt to us all. And now Monsieur Ernest Fielding has vanished, leaving behind questions as dark as the deed itself. But fear not. Hercule Poirot sees through the chaos to the order beneath. I have called you here to peel back the layers of this mystery, and though the final revelation awaits, we shall draw nearer to justice this day." A murmur of anticipation and dread rippled through the crowd. Lady Eleanor, standing near her husband with a stern expression, clasped her hands tightly. "Monsieur Poirot, do you truly believe you are close to solving this nightmare? We trust in your methods, but the strain grows unbearable." Poirot inclined his head, a gesture of respect. "Madame, the strain, it is the crucible in which truth is forged. I have observed, I have questioned, and I have reflected with my little grey cells. Let us revisit certain facts. Facts that, when viewed anew, cast a different shadow. He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze sweeping over the suspects as if each were a piece on a chessboard. He paused near Miss Clara Pembroke, who sat on a chaise longue, her delicate hands twisting her lace handkerchief. Mademoiselle Pembroke, you were the first to see the body, the first to note the mysterious appearance of the note in Sir Reginald's pocket. Your shock, it was genuine, oui? Yet in your distress, did you perhaps see more than you have said? A movement, a face, a hand near the chair before the scream. Clara's eyes widened, her voice trembling. I've told you everything, Monsieur Poirot. I saw nothing until I noticed Sir Reginald wasn't moving. I swear it. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable, before turning to Captain Lionel Drake, who stood beside her, his military bearing as rigid as ever. Captain Drake, your argument with Sir Reginald over business ethics was heard by many. You were near Mademoiselle Pembroke at the critical moment, your attention on her distress. But a soldier, he is trained to see all, oui? Did your eyes catch a shadow too near the victim, even as you comforted the lady? Drake's jaw tightened, but he replied evenly, I saw nothing, as I've said. My focus was on Clara. If someone moved near Harrow, I missed it. Poirot made a small, thoughtful sound, moving on to Mrs. Beatrice Harrow, whose black satin gown and icy demeanor set her apart near the quartet's corner. Madame Harrow, your estrangement from your husband was no secret. You avoided his presence, yet from your vantage, much of the room was visible. Hatred sharpens the eye, does it not? Did you see a figure approach Sir Reginald, or perhaps did your own bitterness blind you? Beatrice's lips thinned, her gaze cold. I saw nothing of note, Monsieur Poirot. I had no wish to watch Reginald, alive or otherwise. If someone struck him down, I did not witness it. Poirot's mustache twitched as he continued his circuit, pausing briefly before Thomas Ashbourne, who leaned against a column with a forced smirk. Monsieur Ashbourne, your debt to Sir Reginald and the argument that followed placed you under suspicion. You stepped to the terrace, you claim, for a cigarette. Yet from this column, before you left, your view of the room was wide. Did anger cloud your sight? Or did you see a movement that now haunts you? Thomas scoffed, though his eyes flickered with unease. I saw Harrow being his usual insufferable self, nothing more. I needed air, not a front-row seat to murder. Poirot completed his round, returning to the center of the room. He clapped his hands together once, the sharp sound silencing the murmurs that had begun to rise. Merci, mes amis, for your patience. I see now the tapestry of that night, each thread, each shadow, each silence. A note does not appear by magic, a letter opener does not strike without intent. And Monsieur Fielding's disappearance. It adds a note of discord to the melody of this crime. Yet I assure you, the pieces align in my mind, though I withhold the final picture for now. He did not mention the hidden clue from the East Wing study, the smudged dust and scratched keyhole on the desk. That discovery remained his alone, a card to be played at the precise moment. Instead, he let his words hang, watching as the suspects shifted uncomfortably, their nerves stretched taut by his deliberate ambiguity. Clara's hands trembled more fiercely. Drake's stoic mask faltered for a fleeting second. Beatrice's icy stare hardened, and Thomas's smirk wavered. Even the other guests, less prominent in suspicion, whispered and glanced with renewed distrust. Lady Eleanor spoke again, her voice edged with hope. Monsieur Poirot, if you see so much, when will this end? When will we know who struck down Sir Reginald, and where poor Mr. Fielding has gone? Poirot's smile was enigmatic, his tone soft but resolute. Madame, the end, it approaches. But first, one final thread must be pulled, a thread tied to a place of secrets in this very manor. Tonight we shall return to the East Wing, and there, I believe, the mask of the guilty shall slip at last. As the suspects dispersed momentarily to refresh themselves under Jenkins' watchful eye, Poirot retreated to a corner, his notebook open, his pen poised. The final gathering had set the stage, heightening the tension without revealing his hand. The disturbed desk in the study pulsed in his mind, a silent clue awaiting its moment. The evening promised a dramatic confrontation, one that would bring the mystery of Ashbourne Manor to its shattering climax. Outside, the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the snow in hues of gold and crimson. Inside, the web of deception tightened, and Poirot prepared to weave its final strands. As twilight descended over Ashbourne Manor, the drawing-room was bathed in the soft, eerie glow of flickering candles and the dying embers of the fireplace. The snow outside had thawed further, revealing jagged patches of earth, mirroring the unraveling of secrets within. Hercule Poirot had orchestrated this final assembly with meticulous care, summoning all 31 remaining suspects back to the heart of the manor after a brief respite. The air was thick with anticipation, the tension palpable as each face betrayed nerves stretched to their breaking point. Poirot stood before the grand fireplace, his small, impeccable frame commanding the room, his green eyes gleaming with the certainty of a man who had pieced together an intricate puzzle. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his Belgian accent lilting over the hushed silence, "we stand at the culmination of a most tragic affair. Sir Reginald Harrow, a man of wealth and enmity, was struck down in this very room, a letter opener piercing his heart. A note. You thought you could ruin me. Now you pay. A friend appeared in his pocket, a taunt placed after the deed. And then Monsieur Ernest Fielding vanished, casting a shadow of further malice over us. But fear not. Hercule Poirot, with the aid of his little grey cells, has seen through the web of deception. Tonight, the guilty shall be named." A collective gasp rippled through the room, eyes darting from face to face. Lady Eleanor, clutching her husband's arm, whispered, "Monsieur Poirot, you have solved it." Truly. Poirot inclined his head, his moustache twitching with quiet satisfaction. "Oui, madame. But first, let us return to a place of secrets, the East Wing study, where a silent clue whispered to me. Jenkins, the key to the desk, s'il vous plaît. We shall unveil its contents before all." The group moved as one, following Poirot through the dim corridors to the cramped, dusty study where he had found the disturbed desk. Lord Ashbourne produced the key, unlocking the drawer under Poirot's watchful gaze. Inside lay a crumpled letter, its ink faded but legible. Poirot lifted it with gloved fingers, reading aloud, a confession of sorts, signed by Sir Reginald himself, admitting to manipulating legal dealings to ruin Ernest Fielding's career. A betrayal hidden away, yet discovered, I deduce, by Fielding himself on the night of the gala. Clara Pembroke gasped, her hands flying to her mouth, while others murmured in shock. Poirot turned, his voice sharp. "This letter, it is the motive for vengeance, the ruin spoken of in the note. But who found it first? Who acted upon it? Let us return to the drawing-room, for there we shall confront the truth." Back in the drawing-room, Poirot positioned himself once more at the center, the letter now tucked into his pocket. Mes amis, the crime was not one of passion, but of cold intent. The letter opener, taken from this very room, struck with precision. No struggle, no hesitation. The note, placed after, was a declaration of triumph. And Monsieur Fielding's disappearance, it was no accident. He did not flee. He was silenced. I found traces of blood, faint but present, on the servants' stairs in the East Wing during my earlier search, hidden from the untrained eye. Fielding was attacked there, his body concealed in the attic, I suspect, by a hand desperate to cover its tracks. Constable Hargreaves sputtered. "Blood? Attacked? But who, sir? Who's done all this?" Poirot's gaze swept the room, settling on one figure with unerring intensity. Mrs. Beatrice Harrow. Her icy facade faltered for a fraction of a second, her gloved fingers tightening around her champagne flute. "Madame Harrow," Poirot said softly, his voice a blade, "you have carried your hatred with dignity, but it is a heavy burden. Your marriage to Sir Reginald was a battlefield of loathing, his infidelity, his cruelty, and now the revelation of this letter. You knew of his dealings against Fielding, did you not? You overheard Fielding confront him earlier that evening, and you saw the letter when Fielding, in his agitation, left the study door ajar after finding it. You seized your chance, not just to kill your husband, but to frame Fielding as the culprit by placing the note, written in your own disguised hand, in Reginald's pocket." Beatrice's face drained of color, but she held her ground. "This is absurd, Monsieur Poirot. I had no reason to harm Fielding, and I certainly did not kill my husband. You've no proof." Poirot's smile was steely. "Ah, madame, but I have the psychology. Your calm, it was too perfect, too calculated. When I tested nerves during the reenactment, others flinched, but you remained stone, a woman who had already acted, with no fear of discovery. And the note, its placement after death was a personal taunt, a signature of spite only a betrayed wife could muster. As for Fielding, he became a threat when he found the letter and confronted you in the East Wing, seeking alliance or blackmail. You struck him with a heavy candlestick. I found traces of wax near the blood and hid his unconscious form in the attic, intending to dispose of him later under cover of snow. But the snow melted too soon, and I, Poirot, saw too much." The room erupted in gasps and murmurs. Beatrice's composure shattered, her voice rising in a hiss. "You cannot prove this. It's conjecture, nothing more." Poirot raised a hand, silencing her. "Non, madame. Constable Hargreaves, search the attic. You will find Monsieur Fielding, alive or dead, behind the old trunks, and near him a candlestick bearing Madame Harrow's fingerprints, preserved on its polished surface, and in her room a pen and ink matching the note's jagged scrawl. A test shall confirm it. The truth, it betrays itself in the smallest details." Hargreaves scrambled to obey, while Beatrice's defiance crumbled, her shoulders sagging as whispers of shock turned to accusations around her. Poirot continued, his tone now somber. "Madame, your hatred was your undoing. Sir Reginald ruined many, but it was your ruin, personal, intimate, that drove you to murder. You thought to pin it on Fielding, a friend in name only, but Hercule Poirot sees beyond such games." As Hargreaves returned minutes later, confirming Fielding's discovery, alive though gravely injured, and the candlestick's presence, Beatrice was led away, her icy mask replaced by bitter resignation. The room fell into stunned silence, the weight of the resolution settling over all. Lady Eleanor approached Poirot, her voice trembling with relief. "Monsieur Poirot, you've saved us from this nightmare. How can we thank you?" Poirot bowed slightly, his expression softening. "Madame, justice is its own reward. The symmetry of truth restores order, and that, for Hercule Poirot, is enough." Outside, the last light of day faded, the manor freed from its shroud of mystery. Within, the guests dispersed, weary but relieved, as Poirot adjusted his tie with fastidious care, his work complete. The note found in the wrong pocket had spoken its final word, and the little grey cells had triumphed once more. 2 days had passed since the dramatic unveiling of truth at Ashbourne Manor, and the grand estate stood under a sky now clear of the storm that had once trapped its inhabitants in a web of suspicion and fear. The snow had largely melted, leaving behind a soggy patchwork of earth and the faint glimmer of renewed life in the gardens. The air, crisp and bracing, carried a sense of quiet restoration, as if the manor itself exhaled after the suffocating weight of murder and deceit had been lifted. Hercule Poirot, ever the meticulous figure of order, prepared to depart, his small valise packed with the same precision that governed his mind. His patent leather shoes, polished to a mirror sheen, tapped softly on the marble floor of the entrance hall as he awaited the carriage that would return him to London. Inside, the drawing-room, once the stage for a grim tableau of death, had regained a semblance of its former elegance. The high-backed chair where Sir Reginald Harrow had met his end was discreetly removed, a fresh arrangement of flowers placed in its stead as if to banish the memory of blood. Lady Eleanor Ashbourne, clad in a subdued grey gown that reflected both mourning and relief, approached Poirot with Lord Ashbourne at her side. Her stern features softened with gratitude, and her voice trembled slightly as she spoke. "Monsieur Poirot, we owe you a debt beyond measure. You have restored peace to our home, unearthed the truth of Sir Reginald's murder, and saved poor Mr. Fielding from a fate too cruel to imagine. How can we ever repay you?" Poirot bowed slightly, his moustache twitching with a faint smile of satisfaction. "Madame, the repayment is in the restoration of order. A crime, it is a disruption to the symmetry of life, an affront to the natural balance. To see justice served, to see the guilty named, Madame Beatrice Harrow, whose hatred consumed her, and to see Monsieur Fielding recover, albeit slowly, in the care of the local physician, that is reward enough for Hercule Poirot. My little grey cells, they demand no fee beyond the triumph of truth." Lord Ashbourne stepped forward, extending a hand, his expression one of profound respect. "Nevertheless, sir, your brilliance has spared us further tragedy. Had you not seen through the note's deception, had you not found the hidden clues in the East Wing, we might still be lost in suspicion. If ever you require assistance, Ashbourne Manor is at your service." Poirot shook the offered hand with a firm, precise grip, his green eyes gleaming. "Merci, monsieur, but I suspect the quiet of your manor shall be your greatest ally now. The storm, both of snow and of human malice, has passed. Let the wounds heal, as Monsieur Fielding shall, with time." Jenkins, the butler, approached with Poirot's overcoat, assisting him into it with the deference of one who had witnessed a master at work. Poirot adjusted his gloves, his movements as deliberate as ever, before casting a final glance around the hall. His mind, though satisfied with the resolution, lingered on the intricacies of the case. The note, "You thought you could ruin me. Now you pay." A friend, placed in the wrong pocket as a taunt by Beatrice Harrow. The hidden letter in the East Wing study that revealed Sir Reginald's treachery against Ernest Fielding, and the subtle traces of blood and wax that betrayed a second act of violence. Each detail had been a thread in the tapestry of deception, woven together by his relentless pursuit of symmetry. As he stepped outside, the cold air bit at his face, but Poirot welcomed it, a reminder of the clarity that winter's harshness could bring. The carriage awaited, its driver tipping his hat in greeting, but Poirot paused for a moment on the manor's steps, gazing out at the landscape. His thoughts turned inward, a quiet reflection on the human condition that so often fueled his investigations. "Ah, the heart," he murmured to himself. "It is a labyrinth of passion and pain." Madame Harrow, her hatred for her husband was a poison, festering for years until it spilled into murder. She sought to ruin Sir Reginald as he had ruined others, to frame Monsieur Fielding as the instrument of her vengeance. Yet, in her precision, the note, the timing, she forgot that the mind of Hercule Poirot sees beyond such machinations. The smallest detail, the misplaced dust, the scratch of a keyhole, they speak louder than any confession. He adjusted his hat, a gesture of finality, as he considered the aftermath. Beatrice Harrow had been taken into custody by Constable Hargreaves, her icy facade shattered in the face of undeniable evidence. The candlestick bearing her fingerprints, the ink in her room matching the note's scrawl, and Fielding's own day's testimony upon regaining consciousness, recalling her furious strike in the East Wing. Fielding, though weakened by the blow to his head and the hour spent unconscious in the attic, was expected to recover fully, his reputation partially salvaged by the exposure of Sir Reginald's deceitful letter. The other suspects, Clara Pembroke, Captain Drake, Thomas Ashbourne, and the myriad guests, had been exonerated, their secrets and grudges laid bare but deemed irrelevant to the crime. Ashbourne Manor, though scarred by the ordeal, would endure, its inhabitants perhaps wiser for the darkness they had witnessed. Poirot boarded the carriage, settling onto the cushioned seat with a sigh of quiet contentment. As the horses pulled away, the manor receded, behind him a grand silhouette against the dusky sky. His mind, ever active, replayed the case's pivotal moments. Clara's initial cry upon discovering the body, the tension of the reenactment, the silent clue of the disturbed desk, and the final confrontation that unmasked Beatrice. A note found in the wrong pocket, he mused aloud, his voice soft in the solitude of the carriage. It was never meant for Sir Reginald, but for the world to see, a declaration of vengeance from a woman scorned, yet to place it after death, it was a misstep, a flourish too bold. Hercule Poirot, he sees the flourish, and he sees the flaw. The journey to London stretched ahead, the rhythmic clatter of hooves a soothing counterpoint to his thoughts. Poirot opened his small notebook, its pages filled with cryptic marks and observations from the case, and added a final entry in his precise, elegant script. Ashbourne Manor, a stage of tragedy, now cleansed by truth. Hatred, it builds a prison for the soul, but order, it sets all free, another victory for the little grey cells. He closed the book with a snap, slipping it into his valise, and allowed himself a rare moment of rest, his eyes half closed as the countryside rolled past. The mystery of the note found in the wrong pocket had been solved, its echoes fading like the last snowflakes of winter. Yet Poirot knew, with the certainty of a man who understood human nature's endless complexities, that another enigma awaited just beyond the horizon. For now, though, he savored the triumph of Ashbourne Manor, a testament to method, to observation, to the unyielding pursuit of justice that defined Hercule Poirot. As the carriage neared the city's outskirts under a sky now dotted with stars, Poirot's moustache twitched with the faintest hint of a smile. The balance of order had been restored, and that for him was the truest victory of all. A week had passed since Hercule Poirot boarded the carriage that bore him away from Ashbourne Manor, leaving behind a household cleansed of its darkest secrets. The clamour of London surrounded him once more, the familiar cacophony of bustling streets and the comforting predictability of his modest flat at Whitehaven Mansions. Yet, even amid the city's rhythm, his mind lingered on the snowbound mystery that had tested the acuity of his little grey cells. Seated at his polished mahogany desk, a cup of tisane steaming beside him, Poirot opened his notebook to a fresh page, his fountain pen poised to record a postscript to the case of the note found in the wrong pocket, a collection of unseen observations and personal reflections meant for no eyes but his own. "Eh bien," he murmured to himself, his Belgian accent softening the silence of the room. "A case, it is not merely the unveiling of the guilty, but the study of the human condition. At Ashbourne Manor, I saw much that did not reach the stage of revelation, yet these unseen threads, they enrich the tapestry of understanding. To commit them to paper, it is to honor the method of Hercule Poirot, a method of order, of symmetry, of the mind's delicate dance with deception." His pen scratched against the page, recording first a reflection on the manor's atmosphere during those tense days. The snow, it was more than a barrier of nature. It was a mirror to the isolation of the soul within those walls. Each suspect, trapped not only by weather but by their own burdens, guilt, fear, resentment, became a study in psychology. Mademoiselle Clara Pembroke, her trembling hands and tearful outbursts, They spoke of a fragility genuine, yet tinged with the weight of unspoken grievance against Sir Reginald. Her family's loss at his hands, it was a wound she bore silently, yet her innocence shone through her inability to mask emotion. Had I not seen her eyes betray only shock at the body's discovery, I might have probed deeper. But non, her heart was not that of a killer. Poirot sipped his tisane, the warmth grounding him as he continued to write of Captain Lionel Drake. The captain, a man of discipline, his military bearing a shield against scrutiny. His argument with Sir Reginald over failed investments, it was fierce, and his proximity to Mademoiselle Pembroke offered opportunity. Yet his gaze, it held the protectiveness of a guardian, not the cold intent of a murderer. During the reenactment, I watched his hands, steady, not twitching with the guilt of a deed done. His anger was righteous, not vengeful. A soldier, he knows death, but not by treachery. The pen moved again, turning to Thomas Ashbourne, the indebted nephew whose temper had made him an early target. Monsieur Thomas, his bravado was a mask for vulnerability. The debt to Sir Reginald, it weighed upon him, and his argument, witnessed by many, painted a motive clear as day. Yet, in his defiance, I saw a young man reckless but not ruthless. His movements to the terrace, corroborated by a footman's sighting of cigarette smoke in the cold air, removed him from the critical moment. His smirk, during questioning, it was bravado, not cunning. The constable's haste to accuse him was a distraction, but Hercule Poirot looks beyond the obvious to the subtle. Poirot paused, his gaze drifting to the flickering gas lamp on his desk as he recalled the other unseen layers of Ashbourne Manor's inhabitant. Ernest Fielding, the vanished solicitor, had been a puzzle within a puzzle. Monsieur Fielding, his nervousness, it was the tremor of a man betrayed. The letter in the East Wing study, Sir Reginald's confession of ruining him, it was a revelation of motive, but not for Fielding to kill. His disappearance, I deduced early, was not flight, but force. The faint blood on the servant's stairs, the wax trace near it, they whispered of violence done to him. His recovery, as reported by Lady Eleanor's latest correspondence, brings relief, though his career, it may never mend fully. A victim twice over by Sir Reginald's greed and Madame Harrow's desperation. The true architects of tragedy, of course, were Sir Reginald and Beatrice Harrow, and Poirot's reflections on them carried a weight of sombre insight. Sir Reginald, a man of wealth but not of honour, sowed the seeds of his own destruction. His cruelties, against Fielding, against his wife, against unseen others, built a pyre of enmity. The letter, hidden in the study, was his confession, yes, but also his arrogance, believing it safe from discovery. And Madame Beatrice, her hatred, it was a slow poison, maturing over years of betrayal and humiliation. Her composure, it was the mask of a woman who had already acted, believing her crime flawless. The note, placed in the wrong pocket after death, was her flourish, her signature of scorn. Yet it was this very flourish that betrayed her to Hercule Poirot. The psychology, it always reveals the truth. Her calm during my tests, her refusal to flinch, they were her undoing. He turned his thoughts to the Manor's aftermath, a coda to the human drama. Lady Eleanor and Lord Ashbourne, their hospitality scarred by tragedy, yet their resilience, it endures. Their gratitude, expressed in letters and promises of future aid, speaks of a nobility unshaken by darkness. The guests, too, returned to their lives. Clara with her fragile hope, Drake with his stoic honor, Thomas with lessons perhaps unlearned. Ashbourne Manor, it shall stand as a monument to both tragedy and triumph, a place where order was restored against the storm of chaos. Poirot set down his pen for a moment, his gaze distant as he considered his own role. And I, Hercule Poirot, what do I take from this affair? A reminder that the smallest detail, the smudged dust, the scratched keyhole, the misplaced note, speaks louder than a shout. My method, it is not of force, but of finesse, not of haste, but of harmony. The little grey cells, they weave threads unseen by others into a tapestry of truth. This case, it was a challenge of the mind, a labyrinth of motive, but in the end, symmetry prevailed. He concluded his writing with a final note of introspection. Each case, it is a mirror to humanity, its flaws, its fears, its capacity for both malice and redemption. As I close this chapter, I know another awaits, another disruption to order that shall summon Hercule Poirot. But for now, I rest in the satisfaction of a mystery solved, a balance restored. Closing the notebook with a decisive snap, Poirot leaned back in his chair, the tisane now cooled beside him. The London night deepened outside his window, the city's heartbeat a steady pulse against his thoughts. The case of the note found in the wrong pocket had left its mark, not on the world, but on his private annals of observation, a record of the unseen, the unspoken, the threads that wove beneath the surface of justice. As he rose to retire for the evening, adjusting his pristine cuffs with habitual precision, Poirot's mustache twitched with the faintest hint of anticipation. The next mystery, wherever it might lurk, would find him ready, armed with method, with insight, with the unyielding pursuit of order that defined him. Twilight draped Ashbourne Manor in a sombre veil, the melting snow outside revealing the scarred earth beneath as if mirroring the uncovering of hidden truths within. The drawing-room, once a glittering stage for gala revelry, now bore the weight of a grim reckoning. Hercule Poirot had summoned the 31 remaining suspects, Ernest Fielding's whereabouts still a chilling mystery, back to this central space for the final confrontation. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows across their tense faces, each suspect a study in nerves, stretched taut after days of suspicion. Poirot stood before the grand fireplace, his small, impeccable frame radiating authority, his green eyes gleaming with the certainty of a man whose little grey cells had unraveled a deadly enigma. "Mesdames et messieurs," Sir Poirot began, his Belgian accent cutting through the heavy silence with crystalline precision. "A crime most foul has darkened this house. Sir Reginald Harrow lies dead, struck down by a letter-opener through the heart in this very room. A note. You thought you could ruin me. Now you pay. A friend was placed in his pocket after the deed, a taunt to us all. And Monsieur Ernest Fielding, the solicitor, has vanished, adding a second shadow to this tragedy. But fear not. Hercule Poirot has pieced together the tapestry of deception. Tonight the guilty shall stand revealed." A collective gasp rippled through the assembly, eyes darting with dread and anticipation. Lady Eleanor, clutching Lord Ashbourne's arm, whispered, "Monsieur Poirot, you have the answer. After all this torment?" Poirot inclined his head, his moustache twitching with quiet triumph. "Oui, madame. But first, a journey to a place of secrets, the East Wing study, where a silent clue spoke to me. Jenkins, the key to the desk, s'il vous plaît. We shall unveil its truth before all." The group moved silently through the dim corridors to the cramped, dusty study where Poirot had noted the disturbed desk. Lord Ashbourne unlocked the drawer under Poirot's piercing gaze, revealing a crumpled letter, its faded ink still legible. Poirot lifted it with gloved fingers, reading aloud a confession by Sir Reginald himself, admitting to manipulating legal dealings to ruin Ernest Fielding's career, a betrayal hidden here, yet discovered, I deduce, on the night of the gala. Clara Pembroke stifled a cry, while murmurs of shock erupted. Poirot's voice sharpened as he led them back to the drawing-room. "This letter, it is the root of vengeance, the ruin of the note, but who wielded it as a weapon? Let us confront the truth." Back in the drawing-room, Poirot stood at the center, the letter now in his pocket as a talisman of revelation. "Mes amis, this murder was no act of impulse, but of cold calculation. The letter opener, taken from a nearby table, struck with precision. No struggle, mere moments after a distraction. The note, placed post-mortem, was a personal taunt. And Fielding's disappearance, it was no flight from guilt. I found faint blood traces and wax on the servants' stairs in the east wing, unseen by others, but not by Poirot. Fielding was attacked, his body hidden in the attic by a desperate hand. Constable Hargreaves blurted, "Blood." "Hidden. But who, sir? Name the fiend." Poirot's gaze swept the room, settling with unerring intensity on Mrs. Beatrice Harrow. Her icy facade wavered, her gloved fingers tightening on a champagne flute. "Madame Harrow," Poirot said, his voice a velvet blade, "your hatred for your husband, it was a poison of years, his cruelty, his betrayals, and now this letter exposing his ruin of Fielding. You overheard Fielding confront Sir Reginald, and when Fielding, agitated, left the study door ajar after finding the letter, you saw your chance. You struck Reginald during a brief distraction, perhaps Clara's gasp at a dropped glass, noted by many as a momentary hush, fell, and placed the note, penned in your disguised hand, to frame Fielding. When Fielding sought you in the East Wing, perhaps to ally or blackmail, you silenced him with a candlestick, hiding him above. Beatrice's pallor deepened, but she clung to defiance. Preposterous, Monsieur Poirot. You weave tales, not proof. I despised Reginald, yes, but murder. Absurd. Poirot's smile was steely, unyielding. "Ah, madame, the psychology betrays you. Your calm during my tests, when others flinched, was the composure of one who had already acted. The note's placement after death, a spiteful flourish only a scorned wife would risk. And the proof? Constable Hargreaves. Search the attic. Behind the old trunks, you shall find Monsieur Fielding, alive or dead, and near him, a candlestick with Madame Harrow's fingerprints on its polished surface. In her room, a pen and ink matching the note's scrawl. A test will confirm." Hargreaves hastened to obey, while Beatrice's mask shattered, her voice a bitter hiss. "You cannot prove intent, it's conjecture." But as Hargreaves returned, grim-faced, confirming Fielding's discovery, alive, though injured, and the candlestick's presence, her shoulders sagged, defiance crumbling into resignation. The room buzzed with shock, whispers turning to accusations. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the clamor, his tone now somber. "Madame, your hatred was your prison. Sir Reginald ruined many, but your ruin, personal, searing, drove you to murder and deceit. You thought to pin it on Fielding, a friend in mockery, but Hercule Poirot sees beyond such games. Justice, it is served." As Beatrice was led away by Hargreaves, her icy gaze hollow, a stunned silence fell. Lady Eleanor approached Poirot, her voice trembling with relief. "Monsieur Poirot, you've freed us from this nightmare. How can we thank you?" Poirot bowed slightly, his expression softening. "Madame, the restoration of order, it is my reward. The symmetry of truth heals all wounds. Let Ashbourne Manor mend in its light." Outside, the last light of day faded, the manor released from its shroud of mystery. The guests dispersed, weary but absolved, as Poirot adjusted his tie with fastidious care. Fielding, under medical care, would recover, his name partially cleared by the letter's exposure. The note found in the wrong pocket had spoken its final word, unveiled as Beatrice's bitter taunt, and the little grey cells had triumphed once more. A week later, in the quiet of his London flat, Poirot penned a final note in his journal. Ashbourne Manor, a labyrinth of malice, solved by method and mind. Hatred builds prisons, but truth sets free. Another victory for order. Closing the book, he gazed out at the city night, a faint smile beneath his moustache. The balance was restored, and that for Hercule Poirot was the ultimate triumph, until the next mystery beckoned.